Coming up, we've got it all Indigenous for you this week. From politics, tribal leaders past and present, even films and a graphic novel. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Thank you for joining the ICT Newscast. Lawmakers from both parties are launching a new push to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA. The 2022 version of VAWA includes new provisions that expand tribal jurisdiction over gendered violence. This push from lawmakers comes at the heels of a rise in domestic violence cases during the pandemic. The act seeks to support domestic violence responses and efforts to combat dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. However, Indigenous legal scholars and activists say VAWA is a patchwork solution to a larger tribal sovereignty and self-determination issue. Early last year, U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland announced a new missing and murdered unit in the Bureau of Indian Affairs to take on these issues. Lawmakers say they are hoping to introduce the legislation in the next few weeks. Now to our coverage on Indigenous economics. Does the economy work for you, and what can be done to make it more fair? Well, a congressional committee is probing those very questions. ICT's Mark Trahant has more.
There is a narrative about how we are defined by talent, taking what we have learned and building a successful career and path. But the economic data shows something else. Families with wealth have a head start. This is certainly true in Indian country, where studies show that American Indian and Alaska Native households have only 8 cents of wealth for every dollar that the average white American household has. A wealth gap that has been consistent. A hearing by the House Select Committee on Race and Economic Disparity explored the problem and solutions. What could be made to make the playing field more fair? Derek Hamilton is a professor and an economist from the New School.
Over the last 50 years, essentially all of our nation's productivity gains have gone to the elite and upper middle class while effectively flatlining real worker wages for everyone else. This has resulted in an obscene, undemocratic, dysfunctional concentration of wealth and power, especially by race, that has not been seen since the Gilded Age preceding the Great Depression.
Testimony Thursday called for Congress to pass the Build Back Better bill, and especially to restore the monthly child payments that began during the pandemic, as well as ways to improve access to credit and home ownership. The committee will continue its work through this year. In Phoenix, Arizona, Mark Trahant for ICT.
A proposal in New Mexico is opening debate on teaching about race. The state is currently grappling with how race should be taught in K-12 schools. Education officials are collecting feedback from parents and teachers on new social studies standards with a focus on Native American history. It also introduces social identity to children as young as 5 and the study of unequal power relations between identity groups in high school. Reverend Sylvia Miller-Mutia welcomes the change, arguing children see race early and that learning about it in school can dismantle stereotypes.
So it seems like one of the goals of the social studies standards is to help students understand that America is not just one thing.
The responses are not being broken down along racial lines. Indigenous and Latino parents are among those expressing concerns in one of the country's least racially segregated states. Parent and Native educator Francis Vigil says he learned about race when he was a young boy.
Kids see difference from a very early age. I knew I was the only Native American brown kid in my community. That wasn't something that I was blind to. as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old.
The state's education department is reviewing over 1,300 letters on the standards and expect to publish revisions next spring. Breakout USA hockey star Abby Rock is hoping to inspire other Indigenous players. Rock is a citizen of the Wahnapitae First Nation in Ontario, but was raised in Michigan. From a young age all the way into college, she noticed few players shared her background, but she says she wants to help change that. Rock will soon make her Olympic debut for the U.S. women's national team. She will be the first Indigenous player on Team USA's hockey roster and the team's only player of color. Rock will hit the rink for the national team next month. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, it's Land Back for a Massachusetts tribe and President Biden's first anniversary in office. Plus, Native creatives talk about graphic novels and the Sundance Film Festival. Stay with us. It has been a year since President Joe Biden has been in office. It's been a challenge, but Holly Cook-Macaro sees things differently for Indian country. She works for Spirit Rock Consulting.
We are going to be hearing a lot in what I call the mainstream media about the Biden presidency 1 year in. I think overall there are concerns about the state of President Biden's legislative agenda, his falling poll numbers, which some people place a lot of value in, some folks don't. He's dealing with the repeated waves of the COVID spikes, inflation, and everyone, I think, is wondering what the administration's next steps will be after the push with Build Back Better as we went into the holiday season, and then what we've seen over the last couple of weeks on voting rights, which we don't expect to see passed today, but there will be some action in the Senate. So those are very serious points. A lot of discussion around those. I don't think this is where the Biden administration wanted to be 1 year in, but and I'll say that for mainstream America. I think for Indian country, a 1 year review is a different picture. We have seen right out of the gate when President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan, which contained the largest single federal investment in Indian country, over $30 billion in the American Rescue Plan. That was and the administration and the buildup and the negotiations and getting to that number and including those funds in the bill, it was a sea change for us. For Indian country, we didn't have that kind of support from the Trump administration in the negotiations for the CARES Act, which contained $8 billion for tribes. So having that support from the administration and in partnership with our other champions on the Hill, really that resulted in that historic investment. So we have, in addition to that, we had in November the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, which contained another, I think it was $13 billion for tribes, and with other funds available in different pots as well. So when we look at overall what's happening in the administration for Indian country, and I think what we see first is his partnership with Secretary Haaland. Her voice and influence in this administration is clear, much as it was in her 2 terms in the House. They've taken the action to restore and protect Bears Ears and other national monuments. They've worked in partnership with tribes on climate change issues. We have 2 nominations to the federal bench. One is confirmed, one is nominated, and I know others are in active consideration as well. Those are important, I think, accomplishments, those like hard accomplishments that we can point to in Indian country for this 1 year in.
That was Holly Cook-Macaro from Spirit Rock Consulting. The Grand Canyon Trust presented Peterson Zaw with a Lifetime Achievement Award. From 1982 to 1987, Zaw served as the chairman of the Navajo Nation. He then became its first president in 1990. At age 84, his long career spans many sectors, including being the special advisor to the president on American Indian Affairs at Arizona State University. Recently, Zaw sat down with Navajo freelancer Janie Parrish at his home in Window Rock, Arizona. She asked what stood out for him in his career.
One of them is probably the development of the Permanent Fund for the Navajo Nation. As you know, the Navajo Nation lived off mineral lease income. They make mineral leases with companies such as coal and all of the other minerals that we have here on the res, including the one that I think that did a devastating job in a negative way, which is the uranium. And so they lived off the annual income of those companies making the lease payment that they have with the Navajo Nation. So when I became the tribal chair, I've heard a lot of complaints about some of those companies, and it will take you to a position that you need to establish, which is that maybe that's not a way to build a nation, because what we're trying to do on a Navajo is really build a nation that we like to work with. And so we decided as a group that what we should do is establish a permanent fund. That way we don't have to rely on income from mineral leases from companies, and we'll have our own money that we can generate through interest earned each year, and then leave the principal in safe places with the banks and trust companies. And that way we have a steady income that comes in each year to do the project that we need to do.
The education of Navajo youth is important to President Zaw.
We used to have around maybe 8, 9, 10,000. We're right over 15, almost 20,000 students that are applying for a scholarship. Of that number that we now have in college, even if you educate only 1 or 2, they get their degree, they're equipped to come back to the Navajo Nation. You never know how much they can do at those local school districts, for example. Organizing the community, organizing the youth, so that they don't have to sit around, not do anything, and idle. It's one of those things that I think they need to learn how to do, is to really create their own things that they have passion for, and just provide them with resources such as education and encouragement from families, their grandparents, and help them. Because even if you go on to college and get your degree or master's degree, you still don't really know what the local community wants done back in your community. So you need the advice, a sense of direction and an encouragement from the elderly people, because they live there all their life and they know what's needed. And all they need to do is work with the youth that's trained in the white man's ways to accomplish certain things. But when it comes to the local community and the Navajo people, they have to rely on that.
Zaw reflected on the Grand Canyon Trust Award.
One has to feel good when they are helping somebody. You have to have a passion for that. You can't say to yourself, well, they They gave me all this problem. Here's the way I'm going to solve it my way. You can't do that. You have to work with them. You have to also encourage them. The concept that they're able and capable and have the resources to resolve some of those issues. And so you put it back on them and say, okay, why don't we look at it? We, not me. And I think to people, that's really, really important.
That was former Navajo Nation President Peterson Zaw. When we come back, a tribe in Massachusetts gets land back. Late last year, the Interior Department ruled that roughly 320 acres of Mashpee Wampanoag land will stay in its control. So now, after 5 decades, the nation is the sole caretaker of more of its ancestral homelands near Cape Cod. Wampanoag Chairman Brian Whedon joins us to talk about the progress of his nation.
This all started back in the 70s. The Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Council was formed because at the time we had seen a lot of developers moving into our ancestral territory and taking some of our lands that we used as common lands to hunt and fish and gather and exercise our Aboriginal rights and our sovereignty. In the 70s, we sued the town of Mashpee for our land. And one of the reasons why we lost that case is because we were not federally recognized at the time. We were federally recognized in 2007. So this has been a battle and a fight for well over 30 years that we've been working towards to restore some of our ancestral homelands. So this is a start in the right direction to rebuilding our nation.
Chairman Whedon shares his reaction to the land return.
The reaction was very bittersweet. I thought about all of our ancestors and elders that started that tribal council and the reason why, we have our connection to our land. When we introduce ourselves in our language, we say New Tomas, and New Tomas literally means my blood and my bones is from this land. When you eat and you drink from the land, you are the land and the land is you. And that's why we're proud to be Mashpee Wampanoag. We're proud of coming from the Wampanoag Nation, but Mashpee is a special place. And we think about all of our ancestors and all of our relations that have paid the ultimate sacrifice for us.
What advice do you have for other tribes seeking retribution?
I want to tell everyone to just keep on the good fight for all of our relations and all of our ancestors. It's taken our tribe. We're the first contact tribe. Everyone wants to celebrate 400 years of the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims and this Thanksgiving, this mythical, gathering and harvest that we had, which isn't true and accurate. And 400 years later, we only received half of 1% of our ancestral territory. We have a deed from the King of England that gives us 50 square miles, never to be sold or alienated unless the whole tribe consented. But instead, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the federal government forced citizenship upon us. So we plan on restoring more of our ancestral homelands. This is just a drop in the bucket.
That was Wampanoag Chairman Brian Whedon. An app for emojis made especially for Chickasaw people is now available. It features about 40 words and phrases, and one Chickasaw mother is already enjoying the new app. Patty Tholahongva has more.
Hi, I'm Lana Barrett. My tribe is Chickasaw from Oklahoma. My mom was born in 1932. She went to boarding school there in Oklahoma. She didn't speak English until she was 5 years old. And she was a fluent speaker, and as we grew up, though, she did not teach us the language. She taught us some words here and there. So here's the app. So far, I'm using it with my children and sending the text to them with the emojis. They were impressed with me and the fact that I could download the app, and second of all, they were impressed that we even have an app to be able to speak our language together and share this together. So if you want to know what the meanings are, you just click on this line up here, and then it goes through all the different symbols and the emojis. Here is CPL, Chapisa Lacho, meaning I will see you or will be seeing you. The language is so important to our culture and our tribes, right? For all Native Americans. But I think the interesting thing is that now we're trying to start to figure out ways of being able to use modern technology to be able to get the younger generation to understand the language and to be able to comprehend it more.
When the ice cream man is a no-show, friends join forces to solve their first case. With twists around every corner, this case won't crack itself. But when you combine brains, loyalty, and persistence, justice will be served. This is the story of The Res Detective, an all-ages graphic novel. Joining us are two of the creative crew, Tully Jacob and Stephen Paul Judd, to tell us the story behind the story.
Oh yeah, so this was something that we kind of had percolating for a long time, and we originally talked about doing it as a television series for kids, and so we wrote the pilot, tried to sell it, and tried to get it out to different networks and things like that, and as things go, it didn't happen, but as Steve and I were talking, and as he was getting more in contact with people who were in like the comic book industry and the publishing industry, we talked about how we could turn this into a comic book. And before we were trying to say, we need to do a comic book. We need to write a comic book. Let's figure it out. We started talking through like, we can do these superhero stories. He had this really cool idea that he could tell you about. And we were like, oh yeah, let's do this. Let's do that. And then I was thinking about it. I said, hey, you remember that story we did with the Res Detectives? He said, oh yeah. So maybe we should do that as the comic book because because it's already written, so it'd be less work for us. But still, but it's still, something that we could percolate and create on and make it something for for the kids.
When the original idea came up, we did it all during COVID, during lockdown, and it was more. The main thing was we heard that like some Native boys were getting made fun of for having long hair, so we want to make sure that the character in there had long hair so kids could see representation. There's the smartest person in the book is a girl. So we just wanted to make something cool that kids could go into a comic book store and say, hey, this looks really awesome. But once it turned into it was bigger than a comic book and a graphic novel, I was worried that we were outpricing the people that I really wanted to get it to. Because, when I was a kid, even a comic book at $3, if you're impoverished, that's a lot of money. You got to decide where you're going to spend your money. So I was contacted by the US Open to do a painting for charity, and they said the proceeds could go to a charity of my choice. I contacted Illuminatives. Hey, I had this idea. If we partner together on this, could we use the money from this charity to send these books to different areas? I specifically wanted to send it to North Dakota, South Dakota, and Alaska because they have the largest suicide rate for the age range that we're looking for among Indigenous people. So they were super into that. They've been a great partner with this. So yeah.
That was Res Detective creators Tully Jacob and Stephen Paul Judd. The Sundance Film Festival is back and will be held online this year, but that doesn't stop the Native film community from getting excited. 15 Indigenous projects are scheduled to be showcased. Joining us is Adam Perrone. He's the interim director of the Sundance Institute's Indigenous program.
We have one feature film, 5 short films, and about 3 what we call sort of like our New Frontier experiences, which are a mix of VR and AR experiences. So they'll be accessible through our online platform, all of these films. As you had mentioned, we'll be doing our festival virtually this year. And so, yeah, all of these will be available on the platform. I know all of the shorts have their own individualized Q&As as well as the feature film as well. And I know there'll be some events around some of the New Frontier events too. And one of the things that we also do during our festival run is we have what we call our Native Forum celebration, which is highlighting not only all of the films and the filmmakers that are Indigenous at the festival, but we also highlight all of our fellows that are also participating. So these are people from across the year that we've supported. So it's, we have some artists working on feature film scripts as well as episodic works. And we also have our New Frontier Fellows, which are Indigenous youth that are interested in looking at film as a career path from New Mexico, Michigan, and Mississippi. And we also, which is sort of like one of our main highlights that we have at the celebration, is that we announce our Meritimita Fellow, which is a fellow. It's a fellowship that's been named in honor of Meritimita, who is the first Maori, really the first Indigenous woman Maori filmmaker, who was a woman who to solely direct a film on her own. So it's a fellowship that supports Indigenous artists who identify as women working on their first feature film. And so we'll announce this year's fellow for that.
That was Adam Perrone from the Sundance Institute. Let's take a look at part of a virtual reality piece featured in the festival called This Is Not a Ceremony.
Hey, why do they bury natives 12 feet underground? Why? Because deep down, they're good people.
You know, there was a lot of tears and there was a lot of anger. Well, it wasn't a good placement. It was not a good placement at all. There was a lot of abuse that happened within that home.
I was kind of shocked and sad that, you know, a person could die this way in an institution like that. And then when they revealed how long he had waited, it should die, you know.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for joining us. For more news and updates, visit IndianCountryToday.com. Stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.